everybody. Welcome back to the Help Me Parent podcast. My name is Kylie, and with me, as always, we have Dr. Ellen Moore. Hello.
Howdy.
We're on the same side of the studio.
I'm not used to sitting this close
I know.
to you.
We're this far across from us, but across from us, we have that segue was so great. We have Ben and Megan Ludwig. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
So, your mom and mother-in-law is Ellen, and so that's a little bit what we're talking about today. In-laws and the relationship y'all have with one another, advice y'all have. But before we dive into that,
They asked me here as an intervention.
I
Yeah,
think
we're
so.
going to spill
Yes.
all the tea.
we had a message going on, and then when you suggested it, I was like, great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
We requested this episode.
Yeah, Ben did.
Intervention time.
So I have my list of
Yes.
questions.
He's like, let's pull it out. But before we dive in and get started, why don't y'all introduce yourselves? How long y'all been married? Fun facts, all that jazz.
Fun facts. We've been married for 2 years. And we have a dog named Winnie. She's super cute.
Yep, we do. She's had her for just over a year and a half now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's we're calling it our parenting practice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Parenting practice.
yes.
Nice.
Seeing how well we can agree on how to take care of a dog.
Take care of a dog. And how's that going?
It's going great.
Yeah, so far it's all right.
Yeah.
Winnie's doing great.
You know, when it's kids, you can't leave them in a kennel.
Right. Yeah.
All day.
Yeah. Write that down. Write that down.
Like parenting advice,
Yes.
number one.
Uh-huh.
Don't leave
Leave them
them.
alone.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good
Although
info.
if they're quiet, then something's wrong still applies.
Yes, that's
Yes, that's
Very
true.
good.
That is true.
See,
Got
y'all
that
are
one
learning
down.
so
Yes,
much.
he's a
Yes.
natural.
Yeah.
He's a natural.
Y'all are so ready.
And then you also have a son and a daughter-in-law,
Yes.
and they have a little girl.
Yes. That our son and daughter-in-law have been married 7 years, and they have a 2-year-old, our grandbaby,
Yes.
their niece.
Niece, how's the aunt and uncle life? Love
It's
it.
wonderful.
Great.
She said my name for the first time last
Yep.
week. So, and I'm the first of the four of us.
She's the
Real-
everybody
to get
else
her-
is Dadu.
It's true.
And then she's May.
She's
But-
May May.
Nice.
Done.
So,
So I take
who's
a lot
her
of
favorite?
pride. For sure, happy.
Dadu.
Sure.
Or not. Yeah,
She's like, I know it's there.
it is. It is for sure my
Yes.
mom.
She is definitely the fave.
Well, thank you guys for coming on today. I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah.
We just wanted to kind of talk and offer some advice, have conversations about how it's been with y'all dating and then now married, having in-laws, and then your also experience with your son and daughter-in-law. So I'm excited. So I think it's safe to say, from the outside looking in, it seems y'all have a healthy relationship with one another, the boundaries set in place. When does that relationship begin? Does it begin in the dating phases? Does it begin when the marriage first starts? Kind of what would be your best advice?
Yeah, I think it definitely happens in the dating phase. As soon as a teen child or young adult child brings somebody, you know, who they're ready to introduce to us, I think it starts right at that moment with figuring out how you're gonna navigate it. We don't want to go into all the details of when we first met Ben, and we actually, this is so sad, we had him to our house soon after he moved here from
like
Arizona.
2 weeks after, or maybe a month after I'd moved here.
Right, which
And
was
y'all
that
were
like,
brand new. I didn't know
no,
anybody.
they weren't
Yes.
dating. He
No.
was
No.
new.
No, I didn't know
What
anybody.
year?
didn't know anybody.
What year was that?
Yeah, was that like 5 years ago?
17, yeah, 17.
Yeah.
Wow.
2017.
So it would be 6 years at the end of this year. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so 5.5
Yeah.
years ago, which would have been like at least 2 years before they even really started dating or really knew each other.
yeah,
Wow.
3 or 4
We
years.
had invited
beforehand.
him to our house.
Wow.
Was like a party, like a game night or something with other people.
Right.
Yes.
It wasn't
And
just-
because he was new and we were trying to,
Get
you know, include him
Uh-huh.
and help him make some friends and all. And so then fast forward 2 or 3 years later, and they have met and I believe started dating. And so we invited him over for something, and I was sending him our address so he knew how to get there. And I was like,
It pops up like
oh
where you
my
texted
gosh,
this person
I've
before, but
sent
it said
this-
like
I
the
had
date
sent
was
this
years ago.
before, and it showed the date, and I was like, oh my gosh, Ben, you have been to our house, but it has
Wow.
He came
Been
once
two-
and then he wasn't invited
Yeah.
back for like
I was
3
like,
years.
we didn't invite him again for 2 or 3 years. I was like, I was mortified.
Oh,
I was like,
no.
oh, okay, it didn't go very well.
Oh, Lord.
But it all worked out.
Yeah.
It did.
Timing
It
is
did.
And now
everything.
you've
Oh my
made
God.
up for those times in that 2
That's right.
years.
Yes,
How
right.
long
yes.
you've been over
Yeah.
He's
there.
been
Yes.
at our house multiple times now. But so, yes, I think you just start navigating it right
Yeah.
then and there, and you have conversations
Yeah.
all along the way.
Yeah. What was both of y'all's approaches like to you introducing him to your parents? And then, Ben, what was like your mindset? Oh, I could be meeting my in-laws, you know? What were y'all going through?
I think for me, I feel like when they're your parents, you're a little bit in the driver's seat. So you're like, yeah, let's go to my house. Let's just see what happens. Like, I'm not nervous. I'm like, it's all on you, you know?
I was
like,
definitely
good luck.
nervous.
yes, he was nervous. But I think I have a close relationship with my parents. And so I needed and wanted their input too on him, because I think by the time I brought him home to them, we had been dating for a little while, or, you know, had gone on a few dates or something like that. So I was like, okay, I don't know. Is this something? Is this not something? You feel like you can't really trust yourself. So you really do need the people who are closest to you to be like, all right, am I off here? Am I on the right track? Do we hate him? Do we like him? Where are we at? You know, like, help me figure out what I'm thinking and feeling.
Yes.
you know?
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teamwork makes it work.
How were you
Yeah.
going into it, Ben?
I was just kind of going for it. I just was like, hey, I don't know if this is going to work out, but it's like you want to get to know everybody who's part of the family and make sure they're not crazy, or, you know, make sure.
Oh, you were interviewing us.
Yeah.
He said, jokes on y'all. I was in the driver's seat. Nice.
Not so much, but I was. It was. There was some intentionality on my part as far as trying to. Okay, well, yes, I like her. This is going great. All right, let's see how getting. It's just one of those steps that you take, and it's like, hey, do we all get along? Is that going to be a wrench that causes us trouble, or something that is a problem, or do we have similar values? Do we get along? How does it work? So
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, I've heard people say you don't just marry your spouse, you marry their family. I don't know if I would go that far to say that, but it is definitely a factor.
part of your family,
Right.
Extended
And
family, but still.
We had this with our son and his wife when they got married, you know, with like, all right, what does this look like? You know, we met her parents, you know, we had a time that we all met and had lunch, and to just get a feel for one, the other person's family and their dynamics and kind of what their background, what they're bringing into the marriage. But also, like Megan was saying, I do think it's valuable to the child and it's helpful to the parents for us to see them interact
Yes.
and how they're interacting and how they're treating each other, how they talk to each other. And we can just pick up on some things that maybe they even aren't aware of.
Because we're figuring it out for the first time
Yeah.
in a lot of dimensions, and they've been married for a long time. They've got, you know, communication down. They've got a lot of things down, and they don't. I mean, they do have a stake in it, whether it's like going to work out and they're going to be family or not. But it's also like they're much more objective. I think it helps.
Can help from your
A lot.
perspective.
Yes. Yeah. And Megan and I had lots and lots of conversations while they were dating to like process it.
Yeah.
I'm a verbal processor, so
Verbal
I
process.
needed my mom.
Yes. Yes. So going into meeting them, you knew them fairly well. You
Yes.
worked in the same building area. But meeting what advice would you give parents to where if they don't know? Like if you were to go in like and you didn't know who Ben was, what advice would you give parents and what kind of perspective do y'all have? Like this is what your kid might be feeling. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said, Ben had been at our house within a month of him being here, but we didn't really know him. And so I think, you know, meeting a child's boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, I think it's a couple of things. One, I think you're meeting them like you would anybody else, that you're interested in them and showing value to them as a human being, that the value of meeting them isn't just as a potential girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse for your child. First and foremost, I think you kind of have to go into it as like, oh, I'm just meeting another
person.
God's gifts on the earth, and you are getting to know them and letting them get to know you. And then once, if it seems like it is going to progress, then you're looking at it with a little different eyes with, okay, what kind of person are they, and what's their, not just like the baggage that they're bringing, but what's their history and their life experience that they're bringing to the table, and how would that impact the relationship?
Yeah, totally. With that, obviously in a marriage, there's two different upbringings. Wife is raised one way. Even if there's similar values and stuff, you ultimately were raised differently. And you're coming together in a marriage. How can that be a healthy contribution instead of something that is like a sore spot? And like y'all's different upbringings, what was that kind of like? So
It was different.
Yeah.
We were raised very different. I mean, I grew up in Arizona. I had 4 younger brothers, and we moved out of the country for a long time. Like I lived down in Central America for 12 years. So yeah, my upbringing was completely different. I mean, we were raised Christian, but we weren't raised really in church past like 7 or 8 years old, maybe.
You were homeschooled.
We were homeschooled. So yeah, I never had gone to school before. So there was that to navigate.
Your parents got divorced.
Yes, they got
Later.
divorced when I was 12, 13. So yeah, it was just a lot of different, like a completely different setting from what she had grown up with and was used to. So I think talking about it, obviously, for sure, is the most important thing. And I think being, at least for me, being self-aware of, well, yeah, everybody wasn't, which to some people might be, well, yeah, not everybody's raised like me, but the level that affects everything, the way you see the world, the way that you relate to other people, the way that you saw your parents communicate to each other is a big one, because you learn from experience more than anything. You just have to be very self-aware and be humble enough to be like, okay, well, maybe I didn't learn things the best as I could have. Because you only have one reference point, really. It's like your parents or your grandparents, whoever raised you. It's like, oh, that's how it's done. And you meet somebody else and you're trying to figure it out. And you're like, okay, they don't do it that way. So, and you have to just figure it out, like within yourself. Is this, is the way that I was raised a good way? Do we want to go that direction? Is the way, like, or do they have some blind spots? Maybe there's a healthier way, or maybe neither one is, and you figure it out. You know, something in between.
I think a lot of those conversations start for sure before you get married, though, because that's part of what makes them them, and even where their values lie and what things are negotiables and what things aren't negotiables based off of how you were raised.
Yeah.
And so that some of those are big conversations to have, that can impact your relationship. And so I think it's, like you said, I mean, we're polar up. His parents were divorced. My parents have been married for over 30 years. He moved around a lot and lived in several different countries. We moved around a little bit when I was younger, but I grew up in the same house for a long time. I went to public school. He was homeschooled. And even our personality, just in everything, it is very true. The opposites attract. So I think some of those conversations, though, are so important to have when you're dating. And then obviously they manifest the longer you're married. I remember a few times, especially the first year of marriage, something will happen. I'm like, where does that come from? Or why did this happen to us? Or why did you react that way? Why did I react that way? And when you really talk about it, it can stem back to some of those situations, having family things or your parent things, or Ben had a step parent, and so all of those things that over time adds up. But to start those conversations as early as possible, and they just kind of
and
naturally
keep having them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep communicating about it. It's not like, oh, well, we talked about it. We both believe in Jesus. Great.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yes.
like,
Done.
it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's an active thing that
absolutely.
Yeah.
you discover about yourself and the other person as you're going, as you're going through dating, as you get engaged, as you.
And even
get the
as
hang
we
of
were
everything.
getting into the serious part of dating, it was like, okay, we had some conversations about marriage, just kind of, you talk about it in this general sense of the word. Okay, what do
Very
you...
abstract. What do you believe about marriage?
Just
kind of
about
thing.
marriage. It has nothing to do with us, but like, do you believe in divorce? What do you think about parenting? Do you want to have kids? All of these things. And then at one point, it translates over to, okay, well, what if we got married? What would our life look like? What would we do about this? What would, and so you have to have some of these conversations about the different part of upbringing, and to say, okay, that part of your upbringing, is that a negotiable, a non-negotiable? Would you do it the same way as your parents? Would you do it differently? And then same on my side. Would I do the same thing? Okay, here's this little thing. Do we agree with that? Do we not?
Yes.
Because some of those answers, if they're starting to not line up, help you figure out if that's the person for you or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Ben did very well was he was talking about having enough self-awareness and humility to ask questions or to explore, other ways and other thoughts. And he very much was that. And so lots of things that he has done really well. He's my sweet Ben. But he invited us in early in the relationship. He invited us into his life and would ask questions and gave us opportunity to speak in. And I think that it was obviously important and meaningful to us because she's our little girl.
Yes.
And we need to know, is she going to be taking care of all of this? But also, Ben, 12 or 13 when your parents were divorced, and then your dad passed away when you were
20.
20.
So, 2007.
And then his mom passed away when you were
2009. That would have been 2020, yes. Right before we were met.
right. So he, growing up in some of those formative years and all, not having a dad to talk to or a mom because of distance or issues going on, and then now they're not there, for him to open up and to invite us into that world, not to be his mom and dad, but to be like
Yes.
a parental voice, was very meaningful and helpful to us building our relationship. And I think that's one of the dynamics too that I think has been beneficial for them. Ben, being the oldest of 5, parents were divorced. He lived with his grandparents for a while. So really, Ben had been on his own for a long time.
Since I was 19, so
very independent, and was had done well, figuring a lot of life out on his own. Megan lived in our house till she got married, until she went to college.
Still in line.
Till she
I moved out after high school, okay?
till she went to college, and then had lived on her own for a few years as a teacher and all of that, but had been much less independent, or independent for a much shorter time. And so I think seeing them, and I think that's where Ben brought a lot to the table of this strength and independence, where it's like, oh, we don't have to do it mom and dad's way, or we don't have to, that there's other ways to do this. And I just forgot. I was going to say something else about that. Lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Well, no, it's like you have 2 separate ways of growing up, and you're coming together, and that's in a way the way you are going to go through your marriage and parenting. And as a parent who kind of like, that's not the way we do things, how can that be kind of a mindset some parents have, like, well, I know what they need. I know what Megan needs because she's lived with me. How can you kind of change your minds, or not change your mindset, but have the right mindset to be like, I want what's best for them, what they need in their marriage and parenting?
You do have to change your mindset. And we have tried to be very intentional about this. We haven't always done it the best, but with both of our kids, when they got married, we told ourselves, and sometimes it takes a little bit for it to sink in to our heads and to our emotions, but we told ourselves, okay, they are no longer ours first. Now the most important relationship is no longer our relationship, but now the most important relationship is their relationship, and we take second place. And so we have to be okay with not knowing everything that's going on. We have to be okay with their decisions. We have to be okay with not giving input. All of these things that just change all of a sudden, that you've been responsible for this person, this child, for their entire life, and all of a sudden she's no longer our primary responsibility. And so for Megan to realize her mindset has also changed, rightly so, that her first go-to for decisions, for conflict, for anything like that, her first go-to is no longer us, but it's now Ben. And Ben had to say, okay, I've been on my own for so long. It's no longer just me and my opinion. I have to go to Megan. So it was kind of like both of them had different people or sources that they relied on. And all of a sudden that changes, and it changes for us and it changes for them, but it's a right change.
But you do have to give yourself a little grace there. It does not happen.
A lot of grace.
And it does not happen immediately.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I was 25 when we got married. So for 25 years, my dad was my go-to. He's the guy that knows everything about everything. And I go to him. And so now all of a sudden I know the right thing now is Ben, but he and we had dated for a year before we were getting married. So it's like 25 years, 1 year.
1 year.
So it's not, you can't just overnight be like, okay, now I'm good. Like I'm going here.
Yeah.
I have enough self-awareness and I know I need to grow in that, but also
It's not done in a day.
right.
Yes.
And so I remember so many times where it's like, okay, like we're trying to decide something, and in my head, I'm like, I really would like to ask my dad because I think he actually like might know. But it's the way in which I had to learn where it's like, okay, I hear you. Do you think it would be helpful for us to ask other people? And then we came to that where he's like, yes, I agree. And then it's like, what about my dad? Like you find ways to do that. And Ben and my dad have a relationship too now where, he is one of his go-to people as well. And so you just have to be willing to give yourself grace. Daughters with their dads, living independently, then getting married, where you can't just go and do things by yourself. We encountered all of that. Where sometimes I'm like, hey, don't forget about me, And Ben's like, I already did this, and this, and this,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's both of us with those natural tendencies of what you had spent most of your life doing. We both had to change.
Yeah.
And that just takes humility. It takes grace. It takes time. But it gets easier the more you
You're
do it.
reshaping yourself in a lot of ways, and you're having to include somebody else in your decision making, in your worldview, like in every area. And it takes the same amount of work it does when you're trying to break a bad habit or to do like change something that you may not like, start going to the gym or like anything else that you want to change about yourself. It's very similar to that, where it's like, okay, I have to include her in the conversation or it's just takes time.
Yeah.
So you have
And
to give each other grace
Yeah.
and give yourself some too.
Yes.
And as a parent,
Yes.
you have to let them do all of that. And it's kind of like where they're running their race and we're still on the sidelines, or we're up in the bleachers cheering them on. And it's like, okay, if you want to pause and, if they're looking back and saying, hey, how am I doing? Or what should I do? Then where they're like, yeah, you're doing it, go. Or you might want to think about this. And I think as parents, to let them, give them the space to do that is really important, as hard as it is. But the other thing that really helps, like I said, that Ben's done really well, is to invite us in. And we've had and still have lots of conversations on the back patio, or while they were dating, we'd sit out there a long time and just asking questions and getting to know each other. And then Ben being willing to be open with us, and then also him asking questions and just keeping communication lines open.
Yes.
Ben, with the loss of both your parents and then gaining in-laws, how was that interesting? Was that hard? Because obviously they don't fill the role, but
Yes
they're
and yes.
yes and yes. They don't fill the role completely, but they are
Yeah.
your spouse's parents, and the relationship you've created with them. How has that benefited you personally or your marriage? And all that.
Or
I think it's
been a hindrance.
Well, I think speaking to that, saying, hey, we're around if you need us to chime in, you want our opinion about something, you want to run it by us, like we're here to help, but we're not here to tell you how things are done, has been a huge boundary that they've set up that's been really helpful, because I think a side effect of me being on my own for so long, I was like, when my dad passed away, my mom was not around to help take care of us. So it was me and my next younger brother taking care of the three little ones for a long time. Yeah. So I just learned how to be really self-sufficient, how to do things by myself, how to think through things without any older person's input. I did have, thankfully, some people who were around when I was younger to help me with that. But I still learned how to do it by myself. And I just got that mental like twist to it where you're just used to figuring it out on your own. You're not like, hey mom, what should I do? Hey dad, what do you think about this? So sometimes I'll think it through on my own, but then like trying to be intentional and being comfortable with asking them, hey, y'all have like tons more life experience than I do. So what do you think? Is this a good direction? Am I not thinking about something or forgetting something or just doing that? And I think as far as just gaining in-laws, it's been great for me. Like they've been amazing to include me into their family and caring enough about her to ask all the questions, because that's important too, I think. Just being like, hey, we really care about this decision. Like, hey, we want to know about you. It's not just like, oh, she can do whatever she wants to. It's like, you know, whatever. I think that was a great thing that I saw that they were intentional about. And I guess in a lot of ways, I'm not saying it to be mean or anything, but it's like they're a huge resource to me, where it's like I don't have that, I just don't have. So it's just like, yay for me. And it takes a lot of, it still takes a lot of work. It's like I can think that in my head, but it's still really hard for me to go ask Philip for something. Even now, it's like we've built our relationship for years and stuff. It's like it's still like I have to think it through and like, okay, am I okay? It's all right. It's all right. You can go ask for that. And I know he's going to be fine with it. Or if I ask Ellen for something, it's going to be like, she's going to be glad to help. But it's more of a me thing where I'm just like,
Totally.
not that I don't want to, but it's
the same of like building a habit. Again, where it's, I spent 25 years with my dad as my go-to, then all of a sudden I'm learning, same thing. You spend 30 years without anybody's input,
without having a go-to.
right? And
Or
now
you spend-
now you do.
you have one, but you have to grow.
I don't know what
that,
to do with it.
Yes.
You have to grow that
Yes.
muscle, the ability
Yeah.
to ask for help, the ability to
Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable,
It's-
but it helps.
It's
Yeah.
it was uncomfortable, and it takes work and intentionality, but it's great. It's working at it. It's great.
Yeah. What advice would you give to parents who there's maybe a significant other in their child's life that they are going to meet, or maybe they have met them, they're not a huge fan, or they're trying to figure them out? What are some practical things parents can do?
I think one of the things is, again, our kids are becoming adults and they are learning to live their life. So it's just this fine line between parenting, and we've talked about the stages of parenting. So at this stage, when they're looking at getting married, we're a coach. And so that's not true. I would say, yes, up until they get married, we're a coach. And then once they get married or are living independently, that's when we're moving into the friend stage. And so I think we have to kind of approach it like that, we're meeting our friend's friend, you know, and she'll always be our daughter, but at the same time, she and I are very good friends, and she wants to introduce someone to us. And so I'm approaching it like that. So I'm not putting them through the third degree, or I'm not holding them at arm's distance. I don't know yet if I'm all for this, but initially I'm just getting to know somebody and keeping my heart and mind open. As it progresses, I think ask lots of questions. One, not rushing to judgments or assuming that you've got them all figured out. allowing time, asking lots of questions, and then making time, making this relationship a priority of getting to know them. We tried to do that with when they were dating, you know, invite them over, or I think at that time we had Sunday lunches, things like that. Now, different things have changed. So now it looks a little different. Now we have monthly brunch and we switch up. Last month was me and Ben, and we went to a brunch, and Philip and Megan went to brunch. This month, Megan and I will go, and Philip and Ben will go. And then we'll all go together. So just creating intentional space for the relationship to happen.
Right.
And I think and y'all can speak to it, but I think that helps them.
Right.
And especially Ben, he hasn't interacted with parents for several years. And so he's like, I don't know, do I initiate? Do you initiate? How does all of this work?
At that point, it had been 15 years
Yeah.
with no parents in my life because they were just, you know, not in the picture anymore. So yeah, it's a lot of like,
New
okay, what are we gonna
territory.
do?
Right.
And that was to that making space. What you're saying there, we did that, or I did that intentionally for sure. In like, hey, let's all go to breakfast, or let's all go play mini golf, or you know, let's all just maybe it's not to like ask the deep questions or like, okay, so what are your beliefs about this? It's like, hey, let's just hang out and
build
see
a
how it does.
relationship.
Yeah,
Right,
build
right.
just spend time together,
Yeah.
not necessarily with like an agenda other than just hanging out.
Yeah.
And I think that was helpful for me too, because like she was saying, they had intentionally made the switch when Josh and I both got married, that they weren't going to input or whatever. But when it first started, it felt like we're not going to input, so we're over here, and now you just have to come to us anytime you want us. You want to spend time with us. It felt very much on me. So I had spent all these years where they do have input, sometimes even when you don't want it. And then now all of a sudden, March 14th, 2022, I get married, and now all of a sudden there's nothing. Not saying they weren't involved, but it was like they had made this internal decision. But I'm sitting over here like, whoa, where'd you go?
Where'd you
Where'd you go? You know?
Yeah.
Where it's like, so we had to figure out the balance of, I totally get that. And I'm thankful that you don't just offer your opinion about something without me asking, but you still can initiate spending time with me. You still can be the one to initiate hanging out, or, you know, so it's not just up to me to carry our relationship now through the adult years. They still have a part to play in that, but they're just not going to insert themselves into a conversation or a situation without being invited. And so we had to just figure that little thing out, to where we were both on the same page. you know?
Yeah. And I
Again,
think-
it takes time and effort.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And it was like, oh yeah, they do still want us in their life.
Right.
And I think that's the thing with parenting through all of the stages. We've talked about it a lot with kids, that we're kind of keeping the end in mind. And what we want at the end of the day is for our kids to have a healthy, vibrant, growing relationship with Jesus and with us, and being a contributing member to society.
Yeah.
And so to Megan's point, to not forget at this stage, they're now grown, they have their own lives, but still the point is the relationship. And that we are intentionally on both sides pursuing that and building that. And I think when your child is choosing their spouse, if their spouse is interested in that relationship with us, is a really good indicator.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For your child, you know, that they're not just, you know, forget your parents,
Yeah.
you know, forget my parents, we're going to do
Do this.
this. but it's the same with our son and his wife. Our son Josh, his wife Kennedy, has very clearly and intentionally communicated she wanted relationship with us. They've maintained good, strong relationships with her family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you want.
Yes. How we've talked about a bunch of great things that come with being in-laws, having in-laws and all this stuff. There's also the bad rap that the word in-laws get, like, oh, my mother-in-law, oh, my father-in-law. How instead of having that mindset, having a good mindset, you have to talk about problems or issues that arise, conflict and stuff. And like, you communicate to them, you want them involved, and then you say, we're here if you want us here. Does that same mindset come into play when it comes with conflict? Like, you initiate it and whoever senses the problem initiates it. Is that true? Because it's true when you are in a relationship.
Yes.
Like, I sense something. Is it hard to like go up to your in-laws, like Ben, like if you've had a problem, is it hard for you to go up to them and be like, hey, like this bothered me? Or is that something?
I think, considering like we've built a relationship prior to there being an issue, I think that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got this figured out to the point where if there is an issue, let's talk about it.
Yes.
As opposed to, well, we're just going to do our own thing and like just kind of you're on your own.
I think it's the same with any conflict with anybody. Like, it's always difficult, but you got to do it, you know?
Yeah.
If you delay it, you multiply it is the issue. So, because I'm very much like a don't get into an argument with people kind of person. But it is true. It's like, if you don't deal with something and like, I mean, if we have an issue going on, let's like, all right, let's sit down right now, get it figured out.
Yeah.
I think the same thing goes with your in-laws. It's like, hey, we need to figure this out. Otherwise, it's going to be a bigger problem. I'm just going to be annoyed with you. And then I think that's where the stereotype comes from, is where it's like you're annoyed, but not quite enough to bring it up and fix it. So it just kind of burns a hole in you. And it's just kind of like, oh, man, we got to go hang out with them again. And which is just because, oh, maybe they, I don't know, load the dishwasher differently than you do. And it's like bothers you, but you don't say something, or it's something that's, you just got to address it, I think.
And you do it together too. So like, it's not just they're my parents, so I have to be the spokesperson, you know, like it's our thing. Or like, I remember when Josh and Kennedy were going to have Ryan, and they just wanted to talk through those things. Okay, this is a whole new dynamic. She's the first grandbaby on our side of the family. So there's things to talk about there, boundaries and expectations and whatever. And I remember she initiated a lot of that conversation, which was super helpful because it wasn't like, all right, Josh, like talk to your parents, talk to your sister. You know, like I even remember she and I had several conversations just over the phone, like, okay, how are things going? How can we help? What can we do?
What can we not do?
Right. And it wasn't just, I didn't have to go to Josh, who would go talk to Kennedy, who would talk back to Josh, who would talk back to me. It was like, we all are just doing it together. So there is no, that's your side of the family, that's my side of the family. You have that conversation, I have this one. It's just, we're all doing it together.
I think, again, that's one of the benefits of, as being the in-law, you build your relationship with her parents, or she builds her relationship with your parents to where you can do that.
Right.
Otherwise, you will rely on the other person's relationship with their parents to figure whatever the problem is out. I think that's where you can take some ownership of it and be like, okay, I'm going to build my relationship so that, because it's going to happen eventually.
Yes.
Like, it just is. You're going to need to address something, figure something out. That way you can.
Yes.
That way you have it built up beforehand, and it's
good.
able to
And
talk about.
I think that's so good. We want a relationship with them, but I still want my relationship with Megan, and I want a personal relationship with Ben.
Right.
You know,
That has nothing to do with me.
right.
Right.
I probably want it more because he's your husband.
Right.
Yes.
And then that you are all open enough to have conversations when something doesn't go right. You know, when kids enter the picture, I think that's a really important time to have good communication so that the stereotype, the bad rap doesn't come. For when the kids are brave enough, you know, to say, hey, here's how we would like this to go with our child. Or we are intentional enough to say, hey, we just had this visit. This happened after Josh and Kennedy had their baby, and we went for a visit, and I did too much, and I come in like a blaze of glory, you know, trying to be helpful, but it wasn't helpful. But we were able to, Megan, Kennedy, I were all able to have a conversation and say, hey, that really wasn't helpful. Could we do it more like this? And it's like, absolutely. But there has to be this willingness and this give and this openness on both parts. Where, yes, the kids have to be brave enough to say something, to speak up, but we have to be open enough to receive it, to hear it, to not be offended by it, and to even invite it in. So we try to periodically too, just proactively, because I can, from Ben's personality, and he's only been in our family for 2 years, it would be really hard for him to come cold turkey and tell me how I offended him or upset him or bothered him. That would be really hard for me to have the wherewithal to say, initiate and say, hey, Ben. And we had this conversation at our last brunch, and I just said, hey, tell me what I'm doing that's helpful, and tell me what I'm doing that's not helpful. What could I do better? What could I do more of? What could I do less of? And that at least just gives him an open door.
You invite feedback then when it's like, oh, well, now that we're talking about it, it's not up to me to be like, hey, so can we have a conversation? So this thing, it's like, oh, okay, we're talking about it. Let's talk about it.
Right. And I just think parents who are older, we've lived longer, hopefully we have some thicker skin, you know, and any ways that we can make it easier, I think is a win for everybody. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the relationship. And what we can do to invest in it, strengthen it, and make it as good. Because I want a good relationship with each of them and both of them. Because by golly, I don't want them keeping those grandbabies away from me.
That's her whole.
That's my angle.
Well, I love that. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you guys for being on this episode, chatting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the stories and stuff. I always love having you on. So thank you guys for tuning in. Just remember that you can parent and we can help.